Really, it focuses on individual responsibility. All of us have, I believe, a responsibility to push back on these falsehoods. And I think one of the reasons that this campaign for the use and abuse of international legal terminology in particular in this fashion as the modern manifestation of anti-Semitism, one of the reasons it's been so successful is that general levels of literacy on international law are not particularly high. And so negative actors are able to get away with spreading these sorts of falsehoods. And I think it is on each of us to educate ourselves, to arm ourselves with the ammunition, to push back on the falsehoods, to fight for the truth, both the facts on the ground and the reality under international law.
Let's start off with your particular area of expertise, which is international law. We hear a lot from people who call themselves international lawyers and experts on international law using phrases like the genocide and the occupation and making a lot of comments that sound as if they're cloaked in academic respectability. They're not, though, really, are they?
Well, it's worse than that. That they're actually an abuse of these very phrases and the concepts that they have defined for so long, and therefore their use in this respect is a threat to the concepts themselves. It waters them down when they are being deployed by formerly well-respected organizations like Amnesty International, like Human Rights Watch. It means that these organizations lose their credibility. It also means that the international courts and tribunals that are engaged with considering allegations advanced under these buzzwords also lose their credibility. So the damage being done when these concepts and terms are being hijacked for the pursuit of this particular political agenda against Israel is enormous.
You're coming out here to Australia to talk to the JNF. What's your message to the wider Jewish community here?
Really, it focuses on individual responsibility. All of us have, I believe, a responsibility to push back on these falsehoods. And I think one of the reasons that this campaign for the use and abuse of international legal terminology in particular in this fashion as the modern manifestation of anti-Semitism, one of the reasons it's been so successful is that general levels of literacy on international law are not particularly high. And so negative actors are able to get away with spreading these sorts of falsehoods. And I think it is on each of us to educate ourselves, to arm ourselves with the ammunition, to push back on the falsehoods, to fight for the truth, both the facts on the ground and the reality under international law. And my mission, certainly in coming to Australia, is to provide as many people as possible with that knowledge, with that ammunition, and with the confidence to push back on these falsehoods. It's only through creating that kind of sense of community, I think, that we can encourage others to speak out, to put their heads above the parapet and push back against this avalanche of misinformation.
We often hear on social media and in conversations with people things like, the war in Gaza is illegal under international law. The settlements are illegal under international law. People just toss this off as if it's a fact. How do we push back against that? Where do we find this knowledge, and how can we fight back effectively?
Well, one starting point might be to ask these people under which law. And I think you'll find invariably they will struggle to tell you. But the reality is that the war that Hamas began on the 7th of October is one that fits squarely within the inherent right of states to self-defense. This is not a right that is bestowed by international law. It is recognized as inherent under the UN Charter. Under Article 51. And that's significant because it is so integral to the ability of states to protect themselves, to protect their people, to function as a sovereign. And the suggestion that this war is in some way illegal or unlawful flies in the face of all of that is at the core of how we have acknowledged states are able to defend themselves. Over and above that, of course, one of the central focuses of this particularly pernicious allegation that Israel is conducting itself illegally in Gaza relates to a misrepresentation of the laws of armed conflict. Now, at its core, there are four key principles, which I'm sure we'll have the opportunity in Australia to discuss in more detail, but military necessity, distinction, proportionality, and precaution are at the core of how the laws of armed conflict operate. And Israel has not just upheld these principles and the laws of armed conflict generally, it has in fact far surpassed the requirements of international humanitarian law. Or the law of armed conflict. And it has set standards that other armies around the world would really struggle to meet. I've been on the ground in Gaza with experts, senior military officials from 6 NATO countries, all of whom were absolutely gobsmacked at the measures that Israel was taking, and all of whom recognized that their own armies, despite being moral, law-abiding armies, would struggle to do likewise, because the measures that Israel has put in place, developed over decades, ultimately of fighting this asymmetric warfare against genocidal terrorists who seek to create as many civilian casualties amongst their own people as possible. There has been a long-standing commitment to protecting civilians on the ground, which has led to the development of these rules of engagement practices which far surpass the requirements of international humanitarian law. So this is where the facts and the law really do become intertwined, because it is the misrepresentation of facts as well as the lies about international law that facilitate the sorts of false narratives. And then, of course, in relation to settlements, we've had this horrendously objectionable standpoint that has seemingly been endorsed by the international community, that Jews should not be permitted to live in certain areas just because they are Jews, that the area of disputed territory, Judea and Samaria, needs to be ethnically cleansed of its Jews. That morally objectionable, horrendous position has been given a cloak of legitimacy because international law is being lied about. And this canard of illegal settlements and illegal occupation is being deployed in order to provide that cloak of legitimacy. So much so that we even have now the International Court of Justice calling for the ethnic cleansing of Jews from that area in one of its recent advisory opinions. An opinion which has no legal binding force, I hasten to add, but nonetheless an opinion which highlights the moral bankruptcy that has infected this court, as it has with many other, unfortunately, with many other international organizations and international courts and tribunals. So, I mean, that's the start of how I would push back on those two examples of falsehoods deploying international law. But there is a great deal more to unpack, to be sure.
The standard opening gambit from a lot of these people is to use the phrase the genocide with the definite article, as if it's an established fact. There's a genocide going on and the Israelis are guilty of it, and it's just a fact, and they get all huffy and self-righteous if you suggest that it's false. But it is false, isn't it?
It's not just false, it's been deployed for a particularly strategic objective, and that is to shut down debate. That is to paint a picture of the Jew as the other, as so morally reprehensible. And we're familiar with this, certainly in the Jewish community, familiar with the purpose of the blood libel. It used to be that Jews killed Christian children to use their blood because the killing of a child was so repugnant and morally objectionable. I mean, nothing could justify that. A child is the definition of innocence, and the portrait of Jewish slaughter of innocent children is meant to get a guttural reaction, a response from people where logic, reason, analysis, all of that goes out of the window. And it's exactly the same here, accusing the Jews of the crime of crimes, of committing genocide.
It has the biblical echo, King Herod and the massacre of the innocents in Bethlehem.
And indeed, and that too. And used in this particular context, it also, if we're going to bring psychology into this, is a phenomenon of projection. It is a reoccurring pattern that the Jews and Israelis in this respect are accused of the very things that have been done against them. And genocide is a case in point. Of course, this is a term that was coined by Raphael Lemkin in the aftermath of the Holocaust to provide legal terminology to the Jewish experience of being targeted for extermination because they were Jews. And I don't just mean the projection of what was done to the Jews in the Holocaust now being used as the allegation against them, but also let's not forget the acts of genocide perpetrated by Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, members of Fatah, other Palestinian terrorist organizations, and so we understand, supposedly ordinary Palestinian civilians that crossed the border on the 7th of October, targeting Jews for torture, rape, slaughter, kidnap, and all unimaginable manners of brutality, targeting them because they were Jews. That intention is at the core of the definition of genocide, of the very concept of the term genocide. And that is ultimately what is now being projected onto the very victims of that. That's why it's so morally objectionable. But the importance of calling it out and of, if you will, going on the offense here, not just the defense. There are so many instances in which I hear debates about this or people trying to explain why Israel is not committing genocide in Gaza. But of course, the objectives of those who were putting forward this false claim was simply to shift the Overton window in the acceptable parameters of the debate. And this was on full display the day after the first provisional measures order of the International Court of Justice came out. I was on South African television debating what exactly the court had said. And my counterpart was celebrating the fact that now we could finally use Israel and genocide in the same sentence, and nobody could tell us otherwise. That was the objective, to shift the acceptable parameters of the debate. That has been entirely successful, and that's what needs to be called out, because the abuse of these sorts of concepts of genocide, the crime of crimes, to advance that particular agenda, that you can successfully accuse Israel and the Jews of this and get away with it in polite society, and become part of, the received wisdom or this mob mentality of everybody says Israel is committing genocide. That's what we've seen with the use of this term against Israel becoming pervasive, and that's what needs to be challenged.
You've touched on something really important. You're talking about facts, logic, a knowledge of international law, and fighting back with that. This isn't really about that. This is about emotion. This is about people feeling as if they want to believe something. And if they feel they want to believe it, they will. And facts will just bounce right off them.
I think it's everything to do with the facts, the reality, what the law says, in particular because international law as a buzzword or as a framework is being deployed in order to seek to generate that emotion. I also believe that people who have fallen for this charade will have an emotional response when they realize that they've been taken for fools here. People who don't really care two straws for Israel. And frankly, why would you if you have no connection to the place and no understanding even of its history or what Israel has done for the world? Fulfilling that prophecy of being a light unto the nations. If you have no real understanding of the country, why would you care for it? But you should care if you've been taken for a ride, if you've had the wool pulled over your eyes. And it is through educating people on the facts, on the law, on the reality here, and demonstrating that they are being manipulated specifically to have this sort of emotional response, that I think we're most likely to be able to get through to people. Certainly, that's what I'm committed to seeking to do, and if you will, to building an army to fight this eighth front with the truth, with the knowledge, with the facts, and with the law.
Well, you're coming out to Australia. You've been to Australia a few times before. What are you expecting to find? Because we get the impression the wider Jewish world thinks that we're copping it right in the face here in Australia. I don't know if it's worse than anywhere else, but it certainly seems pretty bad to us here.
And certainly looking from the outside in, following what's been happening on the ground for so long now, especially since the Bondi massacre, watching extracts from the Royal Commission, the situation since I was last there in about 2 years ago does appear to have deteriorated so dramatically. And my heart goes out to those that have been the victims of all manner of anti-Semitic attack in the last couple of years in particular. It's all the more important, not just, I believe, to provide, our Australian counterparts and the community there with the moral support, but also to provide this, if you will, platform to fight back against these falsehoods and these misrepresentations. I mean, it's patently obvious to me, and was also obvious, I'm bound to say, to the late, great Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks when he talked about the evolution of anti-Semitism as a mutating virus. It's patently obvious that the modern manifestation of anti-Semitism is against the Jewish state, and it's therefore these, blood libels in their updated form of occupation, ethnic cleansing, colonialism, apartheid, genocide, all international legal phrases that are being deployed for the purpose of advancing this cause of anti-Semitism. But the effects of it are the ancient ones that we're so familiar with. The fact that Jews are being attacked in the streets, the fact that they're not safe in their hospitals, within the healthcare system, in schools, in synagogues. So that is inextricably linked from the sort of age-old attacks on Jews that we are very familiar with. But tackling this new manifestation of it, in particular the abuse of international law that is driving it, I think is critical to being able to have that platform to successfully tackle the resurgence of anti-Semitism that we're seeing, especially in Australia.
Winston Churchill once famously said, if you find yourself going through hell, keep going. And I suppose that's good advice. But my question is, are we winning or are we getting our asses kicked out there?
I think it depends how you look at it. So if you look at where we were on the 7th of October and where Israel, I'd say even the Middle East as a whole is today, I think it's imperative that we don't lose sight of the tremendous successes. I put them in those terms, successes. They have been hard fought and hard won, and at enormous significant cost of lives, not just on the 7th of October, but since, including all of the soldiers who've laid down their lives for the defense of the country and the people of Israel. But when you think about the seven kinetic fronts of this war and what Israel has been able to achieve against Iran and its proxies, and latterly, of course, with American support, we mustn't lose sight of the changed face of the Middle East and the enormous prospects for peace as a result of that. The fact that the Abraham Accords have ultimately lasted throughout this period should never be underestimated. I don't think anyone anticipated that was possible in the immediate aftermath of the 7th of October, where it was clear where the trajectory of this was heading. And the fact that there's now, a wholly different relationship with the state of Lebanon, with Syria, as well as Hamas not being in a position to threaten Israel in the way that it was previously. The same with Hezbollah, and ultimately the same with the Islamic regime in Iran. Then that has to be recognized. The inevitable resurgence of anti-Semitism that we've seen around the world is something that we need to fight, as I say, part of this eighth front that we need to recognise and mobilise for. It's something that many people have, I think, in fairness, put their heads into the sand over, and that's because around the world, Jewish communities have been thriving. There has been the ability to contribute so significantly to the countries in which Jewish diasporas resided. And that can lead, and has done certainly, to a sense of security that, it couldn't possibly happen here. There are awful refrains from previous generations.
Mm.
And that's something that I think more people today are alive to. It has come at a great cost. And as I say, the tremendous loss of life, including in the diaspora from anti Semitic attacks. But I think people are awake. People have had their eyes opened to this. And forewarned is forearmed is in many of these situations.
One final question. You obviously know the British Jewish community well. We all read about what's happening in America. We all know what's happening here in Australia. It seems everywhere. People are asking themselves a question. Is it time to go? Obviously to Israel, because at least we've got an Israel to go to, or stay and fight? What's your personal opinion?
It's a personal matter for each individual, and I fully appreciate it will depend on circumstances and family and careers, and not everyone feels in a position to go to Israel. But the fact that that is there and remains there as an option is critical in my mind. I think there is an inextricable link between a strong Israel and a strong Jewish diaspora, and each needs the other. And that's part of the reason that, wherever people choose to reside, if it's around the world, or if it's, as so many people say, to come home, to make aliyah, to return to Israel, that's an individual choice. But the ability to impact this broader war that we find ourselves in, a war for the truth, a war for reality, that can be done from anywhere. And so if people are committed to remaining in Australia and keeping that Jewish community strong, I wish them every success and more strength to their elbow. And let's cover some of the key ground that I think will assist them and enable them to strengthen that community and to strengthen that community's ties with Israel.